So for me, it's Samson. Growing up with the stories of Samson and Delilah and playing games inspired by them, his incredible strength was a significant part of my childhood. So whenever I hear about the judges, Samson is automatically the first one I think of. So, there are many well-known judges in the Bible, such as Jephthah, Gideon, Deborah, Samson, and Samuel. But there is one judge about whom we have very little background information, how he lived, how he died, and other details. Yet God used him in a mighty way. So another questions I'm curious about is how many of you are left-handed? So everyone is right-handed? Okay, I'm also right-handed. So if you are left-handed, Ehud is your guy. And he is our subject for tonight. So this lesson is a continuation of my series about the lesser-known figure in the Bible, because last year I skipped this series because we focus on the teaching about salvation and oneness. So who is Ehud? He's the left-handed judge. Not working. Okay. Who is Ehud? He was the second judge of Israel, a left-handed man raised up to deliver the Israelites after they had been oppressed by the king of Moab for 80 years. So in ancient Israel, left-handed people were often considered weak, unskilled, and unworthy. And most warriors were trained for their right-handed disadvantage. So it was seen as a flaw in the eyes of men, but what others saw as a limitation, God saw an opportunity. So the details in this story are quite fast, and due to Ehud's influence, the land had peace for 80 years. So the longest period of peace recorded in the book of Judges. So our story now begins in. It says here, once again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the verse speaks for itself. Once again. So they just couldn't get it right? Just like us. So the cycle, as we know, again and again. So this time, the Moabites, led by their king, King Eglon, conquered the Israelites. So, verse 3, verse 13, it says, getting the Ammonites and the Amalekites to join him, Eglon came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. So, number one, the few things about King Eglon is that he was smart. King Eglon knew that the Israelites were not a weak group of people. They own the best land and they know how to defend it. Instead of attacking alone, he hired help. So he formed an alliance with the Ammonites and Amalekites who hated Israel and then managed to rule over Israel for 8 years. He was smart. He was wealthy because he demanded a tribute from the Israelites. Just 3 verse 20, it says, Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his summer palace. And number 3, he was king of Moab, who was a very fat man. So, the Bible barely describe a person with their physical appearance, but if the Bible did, there's a reason. So later you're gonna find out why. So King Eglon is described as very fat. He walks in and tells Eglon that he has a secret message for him. In verse 20, can you read, somebody read verse 20, 21, and 22. So as King Eglon stand up, I'm guessing it was probably hard work for him since he was so big. He needed to use his arms to push himself out of his throne. So anyway, as he works to stand up, Ehud takes the dagger strap in his thigh and plunge into the king's belly. But King Eglon is so fat, like I said earlier, that the Bible says the king's why the Bible mentioned that he was fat is that the king's fat sucked in the dagger handle and all. So it went inside. So graphic, gross, um, brutal. I bet Hollywood could make a great movie out of this with all the special effects. So if the world, has James Bond, then we have Ehud, the left-handed judge. So no wonder why Ehud's story isn't popular in children's Sunday school, because it's just, too brutal. So after all, the sword literally disappeared into the fat guy fat. So now Ehud has a problem. He's trapped. In verse 23, it says, Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. So he decided to lock the doors into the room with them, and then he escaped. Now, again, there's a translation problem here because the Hebrew word of how Ehud escaped is not entirely known. So there are two theories. One possibility is that there was a porch of this room, so Ehud went onto the porch and jumped off. Could it have happened? Yeah, sure. And another translation goes like this. So a little history lesson. So before our flushable toilets, there were three main ways to dispose of a bathroom waste. So one option was an outhouse, which meant walking outside to a separate building to use the bathroom. I think other provinces still have this. My grandmother has outhouse, but we don't use it now because there's so many snakes around it. So anyway, so Eglon, being a very fat man, probably wasn't doing that every time he needed to pee, or go. And next is, if you were rich, you could have a chamber pot, arinola, that a servant would empty for you. But again, considering that Eglon's size, you would probably need a big pot. And of course, as a king, he wouldn't want his waste sitting in his royal chamber. And that leaves another option. And then the ultra rich, especially the royalty, often had bathrooms built in the second floor. A castle servant would then have to go outside, walk around to a door beneath the bathroom, open it up, and scoop the waste into a ditch where water would carry it away. So what many theologians believe, and it's in some translation, is Ehud escaped by dropping down into the toilet room, opening the door, and running away. So that's so ew. Now there's an advantage to this situation. So remember, everyone, including the guards, had been asked to leave, leaving Ehud and alone with King Eglon. So according to the story, the servants waited and waited for the king to come out. They assumed that he was resting and waited so long that it became embarrassment. So eventually they got a key. So while the Moabites were still processing the fact that their king was dead, Ehud had already run back, rallied the Israelites and told them to attack, declaring that the Lord had given the Moabites into their hands. So the Israelites attacked, won the battle, and it says that not a single Moabite escaped. So as a result, they lived in peace for the next 80 years. So can somebody read verse 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30? 10,000 Moabites were struck down, not one escaped. So one of the most epic stories in Judges, I know. But believe it or not, there are actually some valuable lessons that we can learn from this. And that is, number one, there is hope in the fact that God hears us when we cry. So this wasn't the first time Israel had cried out to God, and it wouldn't be the last. But God heard their cries anyway. So even though the Israelites had brought this trouble upon themselves, God still listened and provided a solution. So that's how merciful our God is. So for us, we need to trust that God truly hears our prayers and will answer in His perfect way. In Mark 11, verse 24, it says, Listen to me. Listen to me, you can pray for anything, and if you believe you have it, it's yours. So we need to start believing that God hears us. We need to trust Him even when things go bad. But the bottom of it, you answered me, you told me. So when things are going wrong and we need God's help, or did they wait until 18 years later? So if they didn't cry out right away, and God knew Ehud was the person for the job, then God knew the people would have to do it right away. Number two is that there is hope in the fact that God can use our disabilities. So Ehud described as in the text as a left-handed man, which can be translated a man handicapped in the right hand. So we suggest that he was not ambidextrous, like using both hands at all, but able to use only his left hand. So if the has to vote in the leader, he could, probably would have lost on the voting as a judge. Also, the Benjamites, like I said earlier, the warriors, they were trained for the right-handed, but the Benjamites, where the tribe came from, were known for being able to use it. Ehud is like a shame, but Ehud was God's choice, and God used his visible disability in his right hand and his hidden capability with his left hand provided the perfect strategy to free Israel from the Moabites. So if you're going to look back in history, like Sister Geraldine, Bible study last 2 weeks ago, were men of faith who led others to victory. So Ehud turned is what most people recognize as a witness can be strong in the hands of God. So the enemy overlooked Ehud because they did not see that it could be a threat for them, especially for the king. But it's the same thing with our enemy. Our enemy may be overlooking things about the enemy, so we often so what seems like a disadvantage from our limited perspective can become a unique advantage when dedicated to the Lord. So you are never too shy, too tongue-tied, too young, I'm too young for this, too old, too dumb, too slow, too unpopular, too whatever to be used by God. Whatever you see as different from your friends can be used to make a huge difference in your kingdom. And then the last one is there is hope in the fact that God gave us victory. So when God needed a hero, Ehud had a heart after God. So despite his unusual case or what he had been seen as a disability, he stepped up, when needed and conquered the enemy. So he didn't focus on his shortcomings, he used his lack of normality as an advantage, bringing 80 years of peace to his people. As the year passed, so we knew the Israelites enjoyed their pardon and rest, and Ehud, their hero, faded into the background. I'm not sure if you guys heard about Ehud. Yeah. His name became once spoken only in reverence, a reminder of the courage and faithfulness that have led them to victory. So if you guys feel overlooked or unqualified, you're exactly the kind of person God loves to use. So from this story, we learn that the true deliverance does not come from human power, but from God. So Ehud had no army, no chariots, no costumes, no great resources, just a small dagger and a willing heart. Yet that was more than enough for God to use him to bring down the kingdom. So, yeah. And also, Ehud could have doubted himself like Gideon, saying, Lord, why me? My right hand isn't working. He could have hesitated, but instead he left-handedness wasn't a flaw. It was actually a key to his success. Just as God used Stephen, he can use anyone, regardless of our background,